Look, I know a lot of you out there don't want to believe in Nintendo Switch 2 until Nintendo themselves tells you about Nintendo Switch 2. And I know a lot of you don't want to believe when leaks come out about Switch 2 or rumors come out about Switch 2 or supposed specs come out on forums or Nate Drake or Nintendo insiders or Bloomberg or articles, but what about if developers themselves tell you they're making Switch 2 games? Then would you believe? What's going on, everybody? It's Zach from SwitchForce. I find this to be incredibly exciting and also a bit strange, but this is as close to a Nintendo Switch 2 confirmation as you're going to get. This is as close to it's real right there in fine, bold, big print as you're going to get. A recent survey was conducted by GDC, which is Game Developers Conference. You know, the people that hold a conference every year and that have awards that are more awards and less fanfare. Their 2024 show is coming up, and they've conducted a survey of over 3,000 AAA and indie developers. And in this survey, one of the questions they asked them was, what system are you currently developing your game for? Drum roll, please. 8% of the over 3,000 surveyed developers said Nintendo's next platform. They're developing games for the Switch successor, the upcoming Nintendo console, and that equates to about 250 people. Now, we have 66% developing for PC, 35% for PlayStation 5, 34% for Xbox Series consoles, 24% for Android, 23% for iOS, 18% for Switch, 18% for Xbox One, 16% for PS4 and Mac, 10% for VR and web browser, and then 8% for Nintendo Switch successor. How else do you spin this? These developers are anonymous. They are participating in this survey without a face, without a name, without any risk of leakage, and so they can safely, confidently, and confidentially say what actually they're working on. And 8%, 250 of 3,000 devs are working on Nintendo Switch 2 games. Now, you could spin this a number of ways. One, I gotta bring up the fact that maybe some people weren't comfortable answering exactly what they're working on. Two, this is just 3,000 game developers. There's plenty more game developers across the world, and undoubtedly plenty of them were left out of this survey. Three, does this mean that the Switch 2 is closer, farther, or right where we thought it would be? If the Switch 2 is to come out soon, does 8% of developers working on Switch 2 games, does that seem about right? We know that there would be obviously many more developers working on already existing and already released consoles, so it's no surprise that it's lower than PlayStation or Xbox, but it is considerably lower. I think what else is interesting here, though, is that Switch is at 18%, half of PS5, half of Xbox Series X and S. Double Switch successor. Now, if you add those together, that gives you 26%, which places it just below Xbox Series X and S, but this is just a assortment, a hodgepodge of developers. We don't know how it's going to lean. There obviously will be some biases. It's not going to be exactly perfect for a slice of the entire game industry. This is just one piece of pizza in the industry, 3,000 people, boom, here's what they're working on. But I do think it's interesting, given the success of the Switch, that Nintendo Switch development is down in the 18% level. That to me really speaks to the fact that this system is running down to its last, I was gonna say breath, but more like its last big breath, because it'll still breathe for years with smaller titles, indie games, and eShop releases. I think this really does point to Nintendo Switch 2 coming out quite soon, although I will say I personally was surprised that the 8% figure was not higher. You'd think with how many people are developing multi-platform games, with how many people are working on Switch 1 and Switch 2 crossover type titles, that it would be greater than 8%. I would venture to say, though, that some did not feel comfortable checking the next Switch successor box. So perhaps they are developing a game for PlayStation 5, Xbox Series X and S, and the Switch successor, but they only felt comfortable checking 2, not 3 boxes. I think some people would decide to make sure that they are still as secret and honoring of the NDAs they've signed as possible and not reveal anything about the Switch 2. But 8%, 250 people, is still a large enough percentage to know this thing is real. We cannot ignore the fact that this thing is real and that this thing is coming and that games are well in development. All right, it was reported last year by GDC that there were dev kits out in the hands of developers over the summer. And we know that there have been a lot of different things building towards this launch. We don't need to go over all of them here, but it's pretty safe to say that with a notable percentage of developers saying, admittedly, willing to admit that they're working on this console, it's got to be coming soon. If we're going to say that half the people felt safe and half the people did not, that's 16%. Now, if you're going to say that even more than half did not feel safe, we could be looking at usurping current Switch development with Switch 2 development. And if that would be the case, then that Switch 2 is coming very, very soon. I still believe we're looking and targeting like a September or October launch, but at this point, as we're already past the halfway point of January, September and October aren't that far away. September is about to be 7 months away, and October, therefore, would be 8. Given Nintendo would probably like a 5-month hype cycle, they're going to announce this thing in the near future. And I don't know how you argue with developers proclaiming that they're working on it, unless they're being misled, falsified, catfished by a Nintendo wannabe. How else can we argue that the Switch 2 is not real and that the Switch 2 is not coming soon? I think that this, again, is an indicator, and maybe our best yet, that this thing is coming quickly, that this thing is going to arrive in 2024. Because if you don't feel like you can fully trust leakers, I understand you. If you don't feel like you can fully trust reporters, I understand you. If you don't feel like you can fully trust YouTubers and streamers, I understand you. But if you're going to say that developers are lying on an anonymous survey about what they're actually working on, that is a whole nother level of conspiracy that I cannot condone. I think the Switch 2 is fully real. I think the Switch 2 is coming soon. And I think this GDC survey is actually a very nice piece of confirmation for those of us that are desperately waiting for Nintendo to say something. It does look like Nintendo will have their typical February Direct based on what those in the know have kind of indicated, and just strictly based on Nintendo's past precedent and their history and their plan of how they've handled their marketing. It also makes logical sense to have one more hurrah for upcoming Switch games, as well as maybe a few surprises to dot the first 2/3 of the year, and then unleash your Switch 2 barrage sometime in March or April. Now, I think Metroid Prime 4 could easily still be a big game to be shown off at this next Direct, and it'll be interesting to see how Nintendo handles their cross-gen titles. And if someone is developing a Nintendo Switch game that also could be on Switch 2, they as well may have been uncomfortable to check Switch successor and may have just marked Nintendo Switch. So what I'm trying to say here is that this survey shows that Switch 2 development does have a substantial portion of the industry, and that portion actually is probably almost guaranteed larger than what is indicated here due to people feeling like they can't come clean and can't spill the beans on what they're working on before Nintendo actually announces the thing, before their NDAs are up, before all sorts of embargoes and timing and marketing deals are complete. I think this is showing you that the industry is moving forward, and that is further evidenced by the fact that 32% of developers said Nintendo's next console is what most interested them right now. That would be behind PlayStation 5 at 41% and PC at 62%. Now, because this is AAA studios and indie developers and just a smorgasbord, PC makes the most sense as it's the easiest platform to release on and possesses the largest install base, bar none. PlayStation 5 is the most futuristic piece of console tech, and so I understand why that would also garner a higher percentage. But 32% of them are excited for Switch 2. They're excited for the next Nintendo console, because it's not some pie-in-the-sky out there thing. It's something that is real. It's something that developers are developing games for, and it's something that's going to be playable and at the very least revealed quite soon. I'm very, very excited by this news, and I hope for some of you on the fence, this does confirm that it's real. I know a few of you will still wait for Nintendo themselves, but I bet these developers are telling the truth, and like I said, I think the numbers are skewed by secrecy, and the percentage is actually higher. Let me know what you think of this new GDC survey for 2024, and how you feel about Switch successor development basically being officialized by the 250 or so developers that marked that box on their survey. If you still have any doubts, I'd love to hear your theories, but for now, the Switch 2 is real. And until next time, everybody, stay safe, stay healthy, stay happy, stay positive out there. Love you lots. SwitchForce out.